Hello, my beautiful people. Thanks so much for stopping by my channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Goretti and I am the counselor at Butterfly Project. So today, this video is inspired by my clients. This is something that I go over with my clients in sessions quite frequently, and it's been coming up a lot more lately. So that's why I wanted to do this video. It is in regards to feelings like anger, and also this can apply to depression and anxiety as well. It's called the anger iceberg. Okay, and so I'll explain how this kind of applies to, other feelings. But basically, if you can envision an iceberg has the big chunk of ice on the very top above the water line that we can see, and underneath the water line is a huge chunk of ice, way bigger, usually like 3-4 times the size of what we see on top of the water line, if not more. And so that's why we use this in psychology, just to kind of talk about feelings like anger, because anger actually is not a true emotion. It is a secondary emotion. So anger is what we see on the surface, right? If you think of the iceberg, right, the ice that's on top, that is what we actually see on the surface is, anger. You can also use this for depression, and I'll explain that later, and anxiety. But what we see on the surface is the anger, but underneath, that water line is actually basically any negative emotion you could possibly think of. Okay, so I've got a list here. I'm going to kind of go through them with you guys so you can see if this applies to you. So when we see somebody being angry, or maybe it's our children, or somebody at work, or a partner, or whatever, when we see anger, it's not really anger that's the issue. Okay, so underneath that anger, and this is where, if you're trying to deal with, maybe it is anger issues, maybe it's, a lack of forgiveness, or you still have a lot of hatred for someone or resentment, this can help. Maybe it's you had a loss and you're very angry about it. So this can really help you, is to first figure out what is the actual feeling, because it's not anger. Okay, that is just what we're seeing on the surface, but underneath the surface is so many other things. So you could be feeling things like embarrassed, envious, sorry guys, my screen just moved, embarrassed, envious, grief, shame, feeling tricked, worried, distrustful, attacked, grumpy. You could be depressed, stressed, rejected, disgusted, helpless, nervous, unsure, guilt, anxiousness, feeling annoyed, disrespected, unsure, offended. Grumpy is twice on here. That's really funny. Feeling insecure, disappointed, uncomfortable, overwhelmed. There could be fear, hurt, regret. There could be also, another thing is underlying trauma. So people that have, childhood trauma, people that have, possibly PTSD, things like that. So this is just, when we're angry, there's usually these other emotions going on underneath. And so if you can pinpoint the emotion, now we can actually deal with the anger, because really anger wasn't the issue. Okay, that's just what we're seeing or what we're experiencing on the surface. And a lot of times, especially like for instance with children don't know why they're angry, so try to figure out what is the emotion underneath the surface, and then we can deal with that first, as opposed to trying to tackle the anger, because like I said, that's not really, what's going on, right? So for instance, let's say you get really angry, at your kids or something. That's a good one for parents, and underneath the surface, it's not that you're really angry. Maybe you're feeling just overwhelmed with having to do everything. Single parents especially, this is a big one, right? Anger can sometimes also look like, anger doesn't need to look like hostility or viciousness all the time. Anger can look like feeling annoyed, grumpy. That can also manifest looking as anger when really what's going on underneath is something different. So let's say, you're really overwhelmed, or maybe you got hurt, or you're having some fears around some things, or you might be feeling anxious, and then what comes out looks like, anger or grumpy or annoyed or frustrated, but really it's these other emotions going on. And I always tell my clients awareness is key. So if you can figure out what exactly is the emotion, and now let's deal with that, now we can actually do something about it. Now we can address, okay, why am I feeling overwhelmed? What's going on there? Do I need to ask people for help? Do I need to change my schedule? Do I need to drop some responsibilities? Do I need to get people to help me maybe with some of these responsibilities, right? So figuring out exactly why is it that I'm having those feelings, and then we can kind of, deal with dissecting that or breaking that apart and figuring out how to deal with that. Same with depression. So what we see on the surface is depressed. What is going on underneath? Is there an underlying health issue? Is there, so underneath the surface, you're going to have all these other feelings, right? But then it's figuring out, why are you feeling overwhelmed? Why are you feeling, these fears? Is it negative, self-talk? Is it maybe needing to change your mindset? Is it maybe, needing to change your diet? Maybe you're not getting enough sleep. Maybe you have, like I said, an underlying, health issue. I know, I had suffered with depression a little bit years ago, and sometimes situationally, just based on, big, major depressing events happening, grief, things like that. And usually underneath, what we see as depression a lot of times is things like grief from loss and stuff like that, or hurt or some sort of, pain or trauma. But for me, many, many years ago, almost like I think 20 years ago actually now, I had thyroid cancer. And so with thyroid issues, if your thyroid, hormone is off, you can actually start to see anxiety, depression. This is one of the signs, right? So underneath the depression is trying to figure out like what else is underneath there, what is the actual feelings, what is basically the reasons that it's manifesting, as depression. Same with anxiety. What we see is the anxiousness, but underneath, what is that anxiety from? What are you afraid of? Because anxiety is, fear of the unknown. Depression as well, I always tell people is anger turned inward, right? So it's kind of interesting with the anger iceberg. It is, some people get outwardly angry, and we can see that on the outside. And other people with depression is internalizing all these same feelings that I mentioned, but you're actually internalizing them. Okay. So, it's really important to kind of figure out what emotions are underneath the surface so that we can actually address them, dissect them, and do something about them. So this is kind of how, this is a really simplistic view on how to deal with anger, but just so you guys know, this is also helpful in our communication with people or understanding, our children or our friends, family, our partners, coworkers. It's a lot easier for us to kind of understand, why is this person, reacting or acting this way? What's going on underneath the surface? And that's actually a good question to ask people sometimes. When you see somebody angry, instead of just reacting to that anger or thinking, and judging them, maybe asking them, what are you feeling? What's going on, like, underneath what we're seeing, which is the anger, maybe it's depression or anxiety, is trying to go deeper and figuring out what that is. All right, my loves, I hope this was helpful for you. If it was, please share this video with anybody you think it might be helpful for. Don't forget as well, I always post in the description box below if you would like to work with me. And yeah, do all the things like share, subscribe to the channel. Would love to have you here. As you guys know, I do these videos because I love helping people and trying to do as much as I can to help you guys. So thanks so much for being here. And as always, I wish you guys all peace, love, and light. Until next time. Bye-bye.